Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back. This is the Networking RX podcast. I am your host, Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today we're going to talk about broken windows and fixing broken windows. It sounds as if I'm completely off my rocker, and I am, just not for this reason. But at any rate, broken windows. Let's talk about the New York City subway system. If you were around and aware in the 70s and 80s, the New York subway system seemed to be completely beyond hope. I was in junior high and high school during that period, and I remember this, not vividly, but I certainly remember reports of it being on the news, and there wasn't a lot of news. We didn't have 24-hour news. We only had 3 stations. Actually, where I grew up, we had 2 stations. But it was certainly talked about in the news, and we would get Time Magazine or Newsweek, and there was discussions in there as well. But the New York subway system, there was a lot of crime, violent crime, petty crime, a lot of graffiti. It was really in a state of disrepair. They had to try and curb this. Obviously, if you're the city of New York and you're putting millions and billions of dollars into a subway system, you want people to use the subway system. If they don't use it, you don't have revenue. If you don't have revenue, you can't meet your expenses. You incur losses, taxpayers aren't happy, the story goes on and on and on. Nothing new there. So they want to fix the subway system, and so they tried a lot of different things. They tried having police escorts, having police officers ride the subway system, police officers visible in the subway system, figuring that would deter crime, violent crime, petty crime. When I'm talking petty crime, I'm talking things like fare skipping, jumping the turnstiles, essentially riding for free. And if you're in a business, you don't want your product to be going away for free. So it was really in a state of disrepair from a lot of standpoints. Obviously, operationally, it was in a state of disrepair. There was graffiti everywhere, and revenues are down. And because revenues are down, they're not investing in repairing things, cleaning up graffiti, and it just seemed to get worse and worse and worse. So they tried a number of things. That, there were police escorts, police riding the trains, police who were visible at the subway terminals, just showing a presence, trying to deter activity. Really didn't work. There was an organization. There were a group of people called the Guardian Angels. I kind of refer to them, or I shouldn't say I refer to them. I don't want to be politically incorrect. But I will share with you my thinking of it, when I'm a teenager, that these were biker types, but nice biker types. And when I mean biker types, these were people who had somewhat of an imposing presence. At least that was my impression of them. They all wore jackets, berets, I believe it was, and they rode the subway system. And the New York City allowed them to ride the subway system just kind of almost like as a neighborhood watch group. Didn't really work. They had massive investment in the subway system. Hey, if we build something nice, then maybe people will respect it. But none of it seemed to stem the tide of violence and graffiti on the train system. So, it's kind of, where does this end? Where's the rock bottom? Does we just stop having a subway system? And if you're a city like New York or Chicago or LA, Houston, some of these major cities, you have to have some sort of mass transit system. You have people living way out of town or on the outskirts of towns and suburbs. You need to have a way of moving people in and moving people out. They all can't live within the city. So anyhow, in the 1990s, they hired a police commissioner by the name of William Branton, and he and the then mayor, Rudy Giuliani, that's a name that's familiar, Branton and Giuliani took measures that turned the tide in the subway system. What they did, or how they did it, is they focused their attention on battling minor offenses, such as petty theft. They were going to go after people who were committing petty theft. They were going to, if they were going to go after people who were responsible for graffiti, and if there was graffiti, they had a task force that quickly went out and cleaned up the graffiti. They weren't going to allow graffiti to stay. So if somebody painted something on a wall, they were out there ASAP cleaning it up, painting over it, washing it off. They went after, in a big way, the people who were responsible for evading fares, jumping the turnstiles. And what this did was this sent a message to the more violent offenders, a subtle message, but it sent a message to be on notice. Because if you're a violent offender and they're going after somebody who's just a petty thief, you got to think in the back of your mind, oh my gosh, I really need to take my so-called business elsewhere, because if they're going after the petty offenders, what are they going to do to me? They're throwing the book at the petty offenders. What are they going to do to me? And so it kind of put them on notice, and they moved on. And it cleaned up the subway system. And this didn't happen overnight. It took time. And so you're essentially moving a culture. You're essentially fixing a culture that had been broken for years, decades. And so it certainly took time, but there were some metrics there, and they could show that the subway system was turning the corner. There was less crime, revenue was up, ridership was up, obviously going along with revenue. People were using the subway system. Surveys showed people were more comfortable using the subway system. So this was a big win for the city of New York. And like most things, wins and losses are things that capture the attention of the media. And so the media got with Branton and Giuliani and just started to interview him. What was the difference? And what they revealed is that they were inspired by two social scientists who had published an article in the March 1982 issue of the Atlantic Monthly magazine. And in the article, the scientists theorized that if a window were broken in a building, think in your head a manufacturing facility or a big building with lots of tiny little 9x9 windows, or however small windows, that if one of those windows were broken and wasn't fixed, more windows would soon be broken. And then eventually, bigger things would start happening to the building. Graffiti. People, breaking doors, people moving in, people being in the building. It's that the windows are broken. It's a clear indication that nobody's there. It's a clear indication that nobody cares. And so if nobody cares, then everybody sort of just takes advantage of it. And we see this all the time. You see areas where there's just lots of trash. Well, if somebody's not picking up trash, it's kind of an indication to everybody else that, hey, nobody cares, it's okay. And additional trash will be strewn around. And you see that. You see parks and they have cleanups, and with the cleanups, they realize, okay, somebody's put effort into cleaning this up. I'm going to make an effort to not add to the mess. But if somebody is taking a stand or doing something, then socially, you're not going to do something to undo what they've done. This is known as the broken window theory. And I think of my grandparents lived in Chicago. They lived in Jefferson Park, which is actually Chicago. And behind my grandparents' house, there was a building, and there were broken windows. And I remember always thinking to myself, oh, it'd be neat to just throw a rock through there. Now, I know my grandfather would have killed me. My dad would have killed me if I did. But I just remember thinking about it. I didn't know anything about the whole broken window theory, but just the whole notion of I could actually break a window and it would be okay because nobody cares. I mean, obviously it wouldn't be okay, but nobody cares. Nobody would come after me. And so I had this, as a young teen, or maybe I wasn't even a teenager at the point, just had this compulsion of, wow, I could get away with this. and nobody cares. So, the broken window theory is essentially that it more or less states that if you allow signs of neglect, you create an environment of further disorder. So if you're allowing the little things to happen, you're probably okay with the big things. I mean, because where does it stop? A broken window leads to a little graffiti, leads to somebody coming and going as they want, leads to somebody having a fire in there to stay warm, leads to just plain moving in with whatever kind of operation, a hangout for whomever. So it just kind of escalates and escalates and escalates. And bringing this back to networking, the question I certainly ask of AmSpirit Business Connections groups, and I ask of people individually about their own networking activities, is what are the broken windows in your networking? What are the little things that you're neglecting that might be sending a bigger message that's hurting you? It could be not having a great introduction, 30-second commercial, if you will. It could be not having a great handshake and kind of sending a message that you're indifferent about meeting somebody. It could be not investing time and money in having a professional appearance, whether it's a website or a business card. That's a good example. Business cards, people who have business cards that they've clearly done on a laser printer or a dot matrix. I don't know if they have dot matrix anymore. Inkjet printers on very flimsy cardstock, sending a message that I'm not really committed to my business. I'm not really committed to what I'm doing. Not promptly following up, being late, not listening. People who are in meetings or meeting with somebody and they're on their phone. This happened to me the other day, talking to somebody and they were on their phone and I was talking. When I say they were on their phone, they were playing around, punching things in, and I was talking and I just stopped talking. And then they kind of looked up and they're like, well, I'm listening. I'm like, well, it doesn't feel like it. Well, I can do both, but that sends a message. You really can't do both. You can't do both effectively. So think about your networking. Think about the people that you interact with. Think about what are the things that I should try and address. And and it certainly can be a difficult thing thinking about the things that you can address, but what I invite you to do is this, is I invite you to look at things that other people do that bother you. I invite you to find the broken windows in other people's lives and ask yourself, do I do the same thing? Now, I shouldn't say I've been known. Admittedly, I have been on my phone talking to somebody else. I don't like it when other people do it to me. Now, I can justify in my mind, well, I'm different because blah, blah, blah. There was a reason for that. Fair enough. We tend to judge other people black and white and judge ourselves with shades of gray, but that's something that I need to do a better job of. Thinking about it, there are times I could be better with my elevator speech, what I have to say when somebody says, hey, what is it you do? There have been times, not always, but there have been times where I just kind of just throw something out there. Handshakes I'm pretty good with. I think I'm pretty good with those all the time. Eye contact, being present in conversations, those are all little things. But I know I can be better. I know I have broken windows. And I'm not going to say you do too, because I don't know you, but you likely do. And the point of this particular episode is think about, and in your heart of hearts, think about what those broken windows are and try and address them. Try and fix those. Because if you address the little things, it will lead to improving the bigger things. I have a franchisee within AmSpirit Business Connections who has a saying, and it's very appropriate. How you do the little things is how you do the big things. And there's a lot of truth to that, in that people who cut corners on the little things are also cutting corners on the big things. Now, people could say, well, I don't. But reality is the little things are how you do the little things is how you do the big things. Because nobody, there is no clear line between what's little and what's big. So just something to think about, addressing the broken windows in your world with respect to networking, addressing the little things with respect to how you present yourself, the things you do for others, your integrity, and it'll help build a better network. Speaking of franchisees, we are looking to add to our stable of franchisees. As I've indicated in the past, this franchise opportunity is unique in that it's inexpensive, but more importantly, it's a franchise that's designed to be added on to what you might already be doing. All of our franchisees do something else. For a few hours in the morning, a couple days a week, our franchisees are working the AmSpirit Business Connections program. The rest of the time, they're attorneys, they're accountants, they're professional speakers. It runs the gamut. And they work this on a part-time basis, and it actually feeds their regular business, but then their regular business, they have the ability to operate on an ongoing basis. If you're interested, contact me using the email in the show notes or the one we provide at the end of the podcast.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connections. All rights reserved.